Good morning, everyone out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this episode, we are going to start on something honestly should have done in the first place. We are going to do an engine swap on my brother's 1995 Gulfstream Sunsport RV. We have a replacement 454 for it, so this is going to be a long episode. I'm going to do the whole episode. The whole episode will be the swap, so make sure you watch the whole thing. And without further ado, let's get started. Alright, anyone who's followed the channel, you know this site. This is the original 454 that has been in this RV, and we have fought with it and fought with it and fought with it, and we have rebuilt the TBI, and we have changed all the ignition components and cleaned up grounds, and we're at the point where it'll fire off with the bump of a key, but it runs terribly. When you try to give it gas, it falls flat on its face. It chooches really bad. It's running crazy rich and just junk. The only thing we didn't change out was this EGR right here, and don't think that's the problem. So, long story short, I found a deal on Facebook to pick up a 454 and transmission from another RV for a combo price of $1,500, which is a really great deal. So, pick that up and let's go take a look at it. Okay, so here is our replacement 454, and it's mostly dressed. Not fully, but mostly. This must be a smog pump. Woo, that's cracked. Anyway, this came from an older RV. It came from an 80 something. So it is old enough that it still was carbureted with a quadrajet versus a throttle body injection assembly. So it was not EFI, not electronic fuel injection. But this 454 is going to drop in just the same. It is a Mark IV family versus a Mark V, which is what's in the RV. Again, that's mostly internal stuff, not a big deal, roughly the same torque and horsepower. It'll drop right in on the same mounts. The more interesting thing is back here. This is a TH400 transmission, more commonly known as the Turbo 400, and it is old school vacuum actuated, which presents a problem because that guy is fuel injected and has the 4L80E, which is this, but with an overdrive. But it's also computer controlled. So I have acquired some doodads that will allow us to essentially slap a Turbo 400 onto a computer controlled system, and we will get to that when we get to that. But for now, that's just kind of the layout of everything that's going on. This must be a vent. Anyway, I'm glad that was covered because that's an open hole. I need to put a rag there. So we're going to get started. So then comes the next question. How do you get the engine out of one of these things? If you take a look, it's not coming out the front. This front cap, this line here, goes all the way up to the top there. And if you wanted to take the nose off, it would be major work. You're not also going to come out directly from the front. It's just not designed to do that. You would need to cut into the fiberglass, and then it's just kind of a nightmare to pull it straight out the front because that's how we got the donor out. We actually had to help the guy get it out because he misestimated just how much work it would be, and it was a job. And it wasn't meant to go that way, and we almost broke the windshield, and it was a thing. So you can't come out the nose. What you are supposed to do is bring it out the driver's door, which sounds fairly ludicrous because I agree, it is fairly ludicrous, but that is what it is designed to do. So the block has to come out through where my hand is right now. Now, obviously there's stuff in the way. So to do this, the driver's chair comes out and gets stowed somewhere else. The engine is going to have to be stripped down basically to the block. So the intake comes off, the exhaust manifolds come off, all the accessories come off. Water pump's already off, but you have to take off the power steering, take off the air conditioner, take off the alternator. All of that has to come off to where you're down to basically a block. We may wind up having to fiddle fart with the steering column. Not sure yet, but through here it comes. I've done the measurements and it will fit. It's going to be tight, but it will fit. We have up to about here. After that, as you can see, we have kind of a soft triangle up here, and stuff's not going to fit. So we have from there down to here, over to here, and we can make this work. You may be wondering, well, still, how do you get it out? So we're going to use an engine crane. Now, most likely a crane, which is this guy here, is still not gonna work on the ground. So we're gonna, do hillbilly things, and we're gonna take this crane, we're gonna put it in the back of my F-250, which you've seen on the channel before, over there, kind of hiding behind everything. And we're gonna back it up to this door when we're ready, so we can get the crane arm in and have ample elevation and room to lock onto the engine, lift it up a little bit back, and then we can very, very slowly bring it out. It's gonna be fun, but that is the correct way to do this if you don't have a shop, and you like a professional RV shop, and you don't have the ability to literally lift the cab off of the frame, which is how they did it at the factory. Because in case you did not know, whenever they put this thing together, you had just a bare frame, a Chevy P30 frame that, ran the length, right? And then when they built this thing, the coach builder, they had an enormous crane. They got everything in position, and then they lower the cab, the part that you walk around in, onto the frame, and then they attach it. And that's how that gets done. We can't do that. So out she comes. If your model RV, if you're watching this and you don't have a Gulfstream Sunsport, check your windows. You may be designed to come out of this window. In our case, no. Window is too small. But some models have an enormous side window, and you may be wondering, why do you have this enormous side window? That's why. It was because the block is supposed to come out the window. All right, with all that yik-yakking groundwork done, we're going to get inside and we're going to start ripping things off so that we can get the block prepared to come out. Okay, I decided to work on the chair first because it also gave me a good place to put my tools. The chair moves. The chair is held in with a setup of 4 bolts. There's a washer on top. There's a nut on the bottom. Unfortunately, it's not self-capturing, so you're having to reach under there to get it. I was able to use a 16mm wrench, so it's probably a 11/16. Let's see. Put this down. So we got 11/16. Yeah, so I would say this is an 11/16 customary, because this entire vehicle is an SAE, more or less. So you need a 9/16 for the bolt. You need an 11/16 for the nut. I don't have a long 11/16 wrench, so I'm using a 16mm wrench so I can get under there and get something caught on something so I can get this out. But that's one down. And how I got the top is I have... Uh-oh.
That hit the ground.
Alright, well, I just heard something bail.
Yep, we got some washers here.
So we got this. I used my impact driver Okay, so apparently this is on the bottom as well. I'm guessing these are like shims.
And it is possible that there is something.
But I use my impact driver with a long extension and a U-joint at the end, so that way I could get around the chair and have plenty of power to bear, so I don't have to fool with this. So that's how we're doing all 4 of these. Rinse and repeat. I'll bring you back when we're actually getting the chair out of here. Okay, chair is out so you can see a little better. They put a nice really thick piece of plywood. I think 2 pieces maybe.
Yep.
And they just ran some bolts through it, and that was that. So it's out of the way. It is now staring down at the bedroom. We have lots of room for activities. So we're going to start, or I'm going to start, just taking everything off. So we'll start with getting the alternator and the compressor, AC compressor, out of the way. The other components, power steering and such, are already off because I had to do that when I was trying to replace the water pump on this one before we changed direction on what we were going to do. So that's already off. It's going to be a gas for me to remember how to put it back together because it's been a few months, but I'll figure it out. Okay, and once those are out of the way, we'll undo some electrical and whatnot, and then the intake will probably come up. I'll save that for last though. What also needs to happen is the exhaust manifolds need to get loosened up. That's always risky business because the bolts snap and break, but we're going to accept that. If they snap and break, we just want them off. And once they are off and this engine is out, that's fine. We can replace the bolts because we have a new engine going in. So that is what we are doing. I'm going to stop blathering about and start figuring out how to take this alternator off. So as my brother just pointed out, I'm a dingus. I actually had already loosened this and got it out of the way for the water pump. So all that needs to happen here is to remove the electrical connections, which are on the back. You have a tab. Probably need to get a screwdriver to remove. And then this positive lug. I think it's just, let's see if I can get this in the camera. This guy here, I think it's just in there. Yeah, it's coming out. Or actually, no, this is a boot, and under this boot is a nut, and we need to take the nut off. So let me get that screwdriver and figure out what size this is, and we'll get that out. All right, so I got the boot up. Let's see if I can zoom in here. So I got the boot up, and I know that this is an SAE engine, right? It's supposed to use all customary units. Couldn't find one, so I knew it was time to go to the old default, which is, when in doubt, grab a 10mm. There you go, it's a 10mm. That is a mechanic's joke. I'm sure some of you will get it, some of you won't. That's all right. So let's get this loose. Get this off, and then we'll put this back on so we don't lose it. All right, so that's a 10. That brings us to this guy right here. I'm going to take a screwdriver, stab ourselves, but get this off. So now the alternator gets out of the way. So next up, power steering, not power steering, or AC compressor. So we've got an electrical right here. That's easy. And we have this bracketry. So we need this right here. Now, just word to the wise, if for some reason you are in such a situation that you're like us and you're having to do this, first of all, bless you, my child, for you are doing God's work. It is not fun. Make sure that your system has no pressure in it, has no freon. I know this one is empty and probably broken. This compressor is probably bad. We've never tested it. But I know when I pull this bolt right here, kind of hard to see, but my finger's on it, that would actually relieve any pressure in the system. So make sure you don't have any pressure before you do this. Normally AC systems will have, actually that's not true, I'm thinking of fuel. Actually, what you can do, if you're not sure, is go to either a high screw or a low screw, the fill ports. Take your screwdriver, press down on the little Schrader valve. You hear a psst. You still have freon in the system, and you need to drain it before you pull that. If you don't get a psst when you do that, then you're good. Go ahead and pull this. You don't have to worry about anything. Okay, I lied. It's a 1/2. Let's see here. It's on tight. There it goes. Oh. This system still has charge. Okay. That changes the equation slightly.
Yeah, that complicates the universe. You ready to see if you're... Wait, this might be R12.
Ooh, yeah. So what my brother is talking about is refrigerants have changed over time in car AC systems. Back in the day, everything ran R12. We're talking 80s and previous, basically. And then at some point, late 80s, 90s, systems began to change over to R134A, which is what everybody ran until 3 or 4 years ago, and then it switched again to R12344YF. That's your useless information for the day. But bottom line is, R12 is really bad for the ozone layer, which is why they switched. R134A, not as bad, but still bad in other ways. So we don't want to let this out. We need to figure out what refrigerant it uses. If it's R134A, I actually have a mechanic shop AC machine where, in theory, I can suck it out and put it in a tank and hold it, and that'd be cool. But if it's R12, that system, that is not designed to suck that.
The fittings aren't interchangeable, right? I believe it's a different size fitting for R12 versus R134.
I believe so. So
if
we
our
actually
manifold gauges will clamp on it, and then we should be okay.
Yeah. So what my brother is referring to there is, before I got this machine, I had an AC manifold set, which is some gauges that let you fill an AC system, but you can't drain it or recover it. And so what he's saying is, if he finds the high-low ports, which are on the other side in the front, and we're able to use those gauges and they actually grab on and everything, this is probably an R134A system, and we're good. We can drain it with the machine I have. If they don't, this is R12, and we're kind of stuck. Because, I mean, you can let it out into the atmosphere, but you're kind of a dick if you do that. So, don't want to do that. Got to come up with something. So we did some digging, and it turns out that for the Chevy P30, or just in general, everybody switched from R12 to R134A in 1994. This chassis, even though this is a 95, this chassis is a 94, which is a long way of saying this is R134A. This is the low side port. It connected just fine. And when we look at the gauging here, we do see that the system is basically empty.
You get about 8 pounds of pressure. A totally full system should be between 60 and 70 psi when everything's completely shut off and equalized.
Yep. So
some of the bigger systems are higher.
It's basically empty. There's a little bit of refrigerant left. I'll still probably try to use my AC machine just so I don't vent that to atmosphere. We could try to just swing this out of the way, but I would prefer to remove it if I can. That's just one less thing I got to worry about smashing into something. So, bring it back. Alright, so got my AC machine out. Turns out this uses R134A, and we successfully recovered a very minute amount of Freon. So, yay. So we can get back to where we were going. Get this out. In fact, the system was under vacuum. We should hear a reverse hiss. And that's not Freon escaping, the system was under vacuum. So get this out. And normally when you do this, you're then going to want to stick the ends in a bag or cover them with rags or something like that so that they don't get contaminated. In my case, I actually, I've got a machine now, so I can vacuum garbage out and make it all nice and pretty and then put it back in. But if you don't have that and you just have manifold gauges to refill the system with, cover the ends, try to keep it clean so that you can refill without issue. So now that we got that out, I'm going to put that bolt back in a bit. And I'm still going to shove a rag in the back of the compressor here so that we don't have problems there. But we need to go ahead and get the AC off of its mounting brackets. And those mounting brackets are on the front side over here, so I'm going to stare at that. This is an adjuster right here, and it is holding in, so there's one of them. And then I think that's actually, let's see, hang on, there's another one here. It's hard to see, but there's another one here. There's a supporting metal bracket right there. We need to get those two out, and that should let us get the entire compressor out. Bring you guys in a little closer. What we're working on right now is there's a really long bolt that holds to a bracket. The nut is here, the bolt head's on the other side. They are both a 9/16, so I've been working this off. As you can see, it's almost out. And let's see. And I dropped it. That is amazing. Okay, so I'll be able to recover that once the engine comes out, but recover it I shall. And now I'm going to probably tap this through so I can pull this bolt out the front, and then the AC compressor should come out. Okay, so here's what happened here. I was right, and I did manage to get everything out that needed to get this loose, but it was kind of rust welded. So I took a hammer, just a standard 1-pound claw hammer, gave it some taps to get it pivoting, took a pry bar, braced it against this metal bracket here, got under it, and just started flexing, and that wiggled it out of where this extremely long bolt was, the one that had the nut. Now the AC is free. Alrighty folks, got some lunch, we're back. I'm going to be making some room here in the front so we won't have clearance problems when the engine comes out. So I am going to remove the crank pulley, not the harmonic balancer, that's not going anywhere, but the crank pulley is going to come out. And then I got to figure out how to, this is I believe the power steering, so how we're going to get that removed. And then this bracket up here, and you don't have visibility from the top, so I was going to see if I could get it from here at the bottom. As you can see, that might be a little tricky. By the way, that's your proportioning valve, if you didn't know what that is. So getting back to this pulley, the 3 surrounding bolts are 9/16, and then the main bolt in the center is a 3/4. And I'm going to go ahead and get these out. Alright, so you see we got the main ones out. I have loosened these other duders. So get these out. And that's 2. we're down to our last one here. So you can see the pulley is free at this point. So when you go to pull this last one, do be careful. Oh, that's a big steering gear. Alright, there we go. Okay, that is your harmonic balancer. And if you want to take that off, you need a puller. We're not doing that today. We are leaving this alone. But I wanted to get a little more nose clearance. So with this out of the way, our attentions turn to power steering up here and identifying the brackets that hold it in, and then getting it out. Alright guys, we're back. So I can't pull the power steering the power steering pump right this very second. I don't have the right puller tool. So what we're going after is the high and low pressure lines. So if you look here, you see a very greasy nut on the right. That's the last bolt holding in the power steering, but I cannot get it out unless the pulley is out of the way. There's no way to do it without cutting the bolt head off or something like that, and we're not doing that. So that's staying in until I get the tool, and I'm going to order it in, so I'll have it in a few days. But on the left, where you see that U-shaped pipe bend, that is the high pressure power steering line, and that is something we can do about that using I think it's a 16 millimeter wrench. Getting up there, at this point the power steering pump is mostly loose. I've taken it out of its tensioner bracket and everything whenever I was pulling the water pump. So I have jammed a extension, quarter-inch extension in to try to hold it in place so I can crack this line loose. And when you go to do this, make sure you've got a catch pan ready, because most likely you're going to have power steering fluid start dribbling out, and that's normally ATF. But that is what we're working on. I don't have enough hands to show you this on camera, so just I'm going to read it out, and then once I get it started I can probably do a little more filming. Okay folks, I have updates. The power steering pump is out. I found the last bracket bolt, which you see that piece right there that's hitting the proportioning valve all on the left of your screen. That is bolted up to the bottom of the block in the front. I had to use an old-timer's trick of hooking 2 wrenches together to get it out. It's a 9/16. It was not fun. I was not able to film it. It took me about an hour and a half just to figure out how to get it out. And then it's a 16 millimeter, whatever size that is, in SAE to get the high pressure line off at the power steering pump. That's what you see there. That bit of shine between the bracket and the pump as I wiggle. And what I'm doing next is I'm going over to the steering gear, which is that guy there. That's the back of him. And I'm going to disconnect the power steering line from it over there, so that once I disconnect the low pressure line on the pump, which is this guy here, and believe it or not, there is a worm gear clamp right there. That bit of shine is the metal band. It's gotten so thoroughly coated in grease it's camouflaged. But once I get the line free from the steering gear, the power steering pump should be able to fall out through the hole that I'm filming from. And then that stinky son of a gun will be out of the way, and I can finally get on to what I meant to do today: get that accessory chunk off, which it's got to come off anyway because all of this has to be transferred over to our new engine. And I assure you, it's gonna get cleaned. I'm gonna get a parts washer sink, and we're cleaning these jobbers before we put them back on, because right now it looks like I'm covered in war paint. Up here. Yeah, it's not pretty. Yeah. This thing is pretty ugly. Anyway, back. All right, so here's our steering gear again. There is a metal heat shield that goes around this, and I don't know if I can show you this. Look up here, there are some screws. I've got the bottom one out. There's one up yonder that needs to come out. There are multiple other screws that are up along the side. The shield is here. See, I'm touching right here. And we need that to drop because we're going to need to drop it in order to get to our exhaust manifold bolts. We're also going to need to drop it to get to all the lines on our steering gear. And there is our absolutely enormous pitman arm. Wowzers. Alright, just want to show you guys that. These are 1/2 bolts up yonder. So, I want to let you know. And back to... Alright guys, so in order to keep getting this metal heat shield off, there's fasteners that we cannot reach unless we take the tire off. So to facilitate that, I have a 6-ton jack stand in position. I have a 3-ton jack I'm doing the lifting with. If you need a highly mobile jack that can lift decently, this Badlands is amazing. Bought it for this project. I've already used it for other stuff. I cannot plug it enough. I am not endorsed by Harbor Freight, but holy crap, this thing's amazing. Like I said, 6-ton. It's near the end of its throw, but at least if something bad happens, as soon as I get this tire off, because we've got it in the air right now, as soon as we get this off, we're gonna go ahead and I'll lower it down onto the jack stand. That'll let us do what we got to do safely. You shouldn't leave it on a jack for extended periods of time. This is a 1-inch on the lugs. Let's see what Uga can do with it. If I can get it to get on. All right. Anyway, we have 5 of these monsters we're going to get off, and then we'll see if we can't wiggle this tire off and see what's behind it. It'll be the first time for us to look back there. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is a new day. It is many days since the last time I worked on this. Where we had left off is I was on the driver's side trying to get more access to the driver's side of the block, to the hydro boost, to power steering, all of that good stuff. Everything that you see in front of you. What was in the way was some heat shielding, which I tried to take it out the right way, and I think they actually foamed it in to where it don't want to go. So I just took out what I could, and it's fairly thin metal, so I just bent it out of the way. And there it shall stay, and I will beat it back into place if necessary. But that gives you good access to your suspension on the driver's side. So if you want to do shocks, if you wanted to do your upper control arm and your lower control arm, all that good stuff, you now have access. You want access to the side of the block to take off your exhaust manifold, which is something I'm going to have to do. You have access to that. If you are trying to take the hydro boost out, or at least get it all disconnected, well, you got access to that too. In this case, actually, we just need to swap it out. As you can see, this one is done. It has been leaking fluid for almost as long as I've been alive, I imagine. And it's got to go. So I'm going to work on getting these brake lines out. There's also some power steering lines that got to come out. And then actually getting the hydro boost clear of its bracketry up here. That'll be important as well. The one thing I am happy to see is that this frame is not rusty. Looks really good through here. And somebody was working in here. This brake line looks pretty fresh, and as you can see, they didn't use the proper brake clip here. It's supposed to be a brake clip that holds it in that hole. So this has kind of been floating. It means somebody serviced these front brakes at some point in the not too distant past. And then you see this is kind of redonkulous. This entire, yeah. Oh, they didn't even bother to put it back in that. That's what that's about. That's a nut. Probably that was supposed to sit on a stud or something like that and then hold this. And yeah, they said, no, we're not worried about that. So that's something else I'm probably going to have to clean up because I don't mess around with brakes. We get them right. All right. So, I don't know if oh, no wonder they turned that off. But this is like a little additional auxiliary blower unit that is meant to cool down the exhaust manifold, because these 454s and also the Ford Companion, the 460, they were known for cracking their exhaust manifolds, and then you get exhaust leaks and you got to replace them. So somebody installed 2 of these, one on each side. They have long been disconnected, but I don't know. I may try to mess with them, maybe not. From what my brother has told me, he doesn't intend to drive this around too much, so I just need to get it to the point where it can go from A to B. It doesn't need to be a cross-country cruiser. It just needs to move from A to B. Okay, first thing we're going after is this power steering line that goes from the power steering pump to the hydro boost. You would normally use a brake line wrench or a flared wrench for that. I don't have one that's big enough. What I figured out is this is a 3/4. The biggest flare wrench I got is an 11/16, so it's not going to get her done. Now, before I do anything with this, because I've got new lines, but I don't want to round this off and turn it into a nightmare. I'm going to hit this with some Croil. Stuff's expensive, but it works. So I'm going to let that sit for a few minutes, and then we'll go after it again. Alright, let's see what we can do with a 3/4. And like I said, I'm going to be nice to this because I don't want to get to a scenario where we got to use vice grips. I would prefer to break it loose and get it off. That feels loose. I wonder if it really is an 11/16. Let me switch here. No? 3/4 too big. 11/16 too small. I thought this thing was all SAE, but let me go get a metric wrench, see if I can get it on there. Alright, so it looks like in addition to it being super custom from the get-go, they're using an 18 right here. Oh. Having the right tool really just makes the world go round. That and Croil. Croil makes the world go round. So you can see how the line's trying to turn, right? So when you're working on stuff like this, one thing you want to be careful of is this: when you break this loose, make sure that this isn't seized on the tube nut and you twist it off. Again, for this particular line, I don't really care. I have a replacement. But say you were working on brakes, replacing a master cylinder, or these lines are all right and you were replacing just the hydro boost. That's something you got to pay attention to. So I'm going to get this off and then we'll get on to the next thing. There's a low pressure line over here held on by a clamp that I got to take off. So I had a brainwave and realized I don't need to contort myself to go after the hydro boost yet, and I figured I'd just keep working on getting stuff off from around top of the engine to get that clear. So what I'm working on now, this is the extension for your oil fill. And just got to get the metal tube out of the way. An 8mm up here. I figured, let's loosen this up, take care of that. Also going to take care of the extension for the transmission fill and the transmission dipstick. And there's also a line for, I think it's coolant that goes into the intake. Take care of that as well. So this is loose. This is already loose. I should just be able to kind of, twist that out of the way. So that's out of the way. Then you've got this bracketry here. This bracketry is connected to, looks like this is the transmission fill line. It's probably not in frame right now, but there's a pair of large nuts here that we're going to have to spin loose. So for the moment, I'm going to go after this coolant line, which is connected up here. Again, it's an 8mm holding it. Get this clamp loose. That looks pretty loose. Oh, we're going to do it that way. Well, we got that off. That's good. How loose is this clamp? Is it loose enough? Let's loosen it a little more. Alright, clamp is not a problem. There we go. Yep, that's coolant. And it has some super gross looking coolant in it. And that line looks, well, it looks a little chewy. That's alright. So that's out of the way. That leaves us with this transmission line that's going to take some big wrenches to get loose. So let me go get that figured out. Alright, watch the birdie. Oh, you stinker. There's a bracket that it is stuck on. I gotta rotate it enough to get the bracket out. And there we are. Now, if you're going to have it out for any length of time, I suggest you coat your dipstick in some kind of a light oil so it doesn't rust. Otherwise, you're going to have to knock that rust off. And this is just going to come out. Well, okay, I thought so. Oh, that would be coolant probably. Yeah, that's coolant. Anyway, let me take care of this. Okay, so you see that I guess that's a compression fitting right there. That is an extension that they attach to the oil dipstick for this RV configuration. So instead of sitting there and trying to yeet the thing out, which is what I was doing because I was being dumb, I need to loosen that. Now I'm pretty sure I've got the whole thing with a replacement engine that I've got that's going in this thing, but at the same time, we need to do this right. That's what we got to do. So I'm going to see. This is going to be an SAE or metric. Let's see. Here's a 5/8. That's 580. All right. What's the next one? Hopefully they were smart and they made it like a 9/16 so that I can make this work. Let's see. They did. All right. Very good of them. So 9/16 on the middle. Just gonna pick this up a bit. And a 5/8 on either end. So we're going to try to kind of lock this in, get this loose. There we go. Okay. Yep, okay. So this is loose. It's not loose enough for me to spin my fingers yet, but it's loose enough that it's not going to try to spin the whole dipstick tube. Good news is, since it's oil dipstick tube, hopefully it should not be rusty. If it is, you may have a problem. Get this out of the way. Then I gotta decide, do I work on getting the electrical harness out of the way from the top, or do I start trying to work on exhaust? Everybody's favorite exhaust. There we go. Just get that guy on out of here. Let that come back down like that. Now again, in your case, if you're reusing your motor, you know, probably take a little better care of that. This thing is clapped out. It's crap. I don't care about it. I just need to get stuff out of the way so I can, you know, lift it up and out. All right. Decisions. I may try out the exhaust just to see how horrible and bad it's going to be. Back in a minute. So thing of 14 has a little bit less slop, so we're going to go with a 14. So it's probably a 9/16. To be honest, this engine, as far as I know, was never done in metric. It was always SAE. So go figure. We're going to use a 6-point. 6-point has more grip power, so when you're working on something that's stubborn, go with a 6-point out of 12. And I got my nice big breaker bar so that I can get some mechanical advantage. We're just going to kind of gently budge on this. See. So it feels like it's moving. Which, if it is, I'm going to be super shocked because exhaust bolts, they don't generally come quietly. It feels like it's moving, so in that case, I'm going to go get my 1/2 ratchet and see this guy come out. Well, it either just snapped or it just came free. Let's see. Oh, B. Came free. That is just wacky. Alright, so we repeat this process for all of these other fellas up top. Probably at some point I should take the spark plugs off, but, you know. Oh yeah, you definitely want to start with the breaker bar. That ain't moving at all. Come on, let go. Thank you. I need to motivate this into the correct direction. There we go. And I'm giving it a push, but I'm not instantly wailing on it because these absolutely will snap, and depending on where they snap, we're in trouble. It may even be worth your time to work it back and forth a little bit just to help it loosen up. Because we also, in addition to these, there are the bolts that hold on the heat shields for the spark plugs. Those got to come out too. Now, if you're feeling brave and bold, you could also just get an impact driver and take these out, but you got a 50-50 shot there. Either it's just going to come right out because of the hammer power and just awesomeness, or it's going to snap. And I don't know which one it's going to be. So anyway, I think this one's nice and loose now, so take this guy out. And there we are. So you've seen how to do it. Rinse and repeat all the way across the top of the exhaust manifold. And then we got to tackle, like I said, the heat shield's got to come off, and the nuts holding everything in got to come off. Don't know how that's going to go. I will bring you back when I get there. Okay, so I don't know how this works. Is there's a stud that is threaded into the manifold, and there's a nut that's holding on this heat shield for the spark plugs and the spark plug wire, mainly the wire. I'm not sure if this actually needs to come out. I don't know how deep that stud goes in. I don't really think actually it's holding itself into the cylinder head or the block or anything, but it would be nice to get it out of the way because there are bigger, heavier bolts up in there that are definitely going into the cylinder head, and I want access to those. So it's 1/2 on the stud. I'm hoping that the wrench is going to get wedged, and then that will let me take my handy dandy 14 and kind of come in like that and kind of do this. And I don't think that's giving me the outcome I want, but let's see. So I'm trying not to destroy the heat shield cover, but I get the impression that that's kind of going to happen. I'm also beginning to get the feeling that probably gonna need try using an impact driver on these, because I can't get as good an angle on these to try to break a bar them off. So you can see I'm using my shorter one, gives me less mechanical advantage. I say all that, and look at that. It broke loose. How about that? Part of the problem is the bolt is pretty rusty, so I had to actually, or the nut is kind of rusty, so I had to work on it just to get it to where you can get a socket on it. Come on. Get on there. All right. I mean, it's moving, but it's tight. All right, that snapped. Kind of what I expected to happen. Now, the stud itself seemed like it was pretty willing to move. Here's my light direction here. Get this off. Alright. I will work on this, but the big thing that I wanted from this, I'm sure you can buy those studs and they're replaceable. But you see that bolt right there? That's what I wanted access to, right here. And those are reman heads. There's a temp sensor on them. That's what this is right here. You don't see those unless it's a reman. So you can't overheat it and then claim that it didn't, you didn't do anything, and they can look at that and say, yeah, no warranty for you. It's like a turkey timer. Alright, that's what I wanted access to. That's what's going to get coiled over the next couple days. It might get some heat too. I get the spark plug out, then there's nothing in the area that can burn. Get it real hot so that the oil can creep in deep. See if I can't break this out. But for now, I'll try to grab that, see what I can do with it. So it turns out, here's stud. It does go all the way through. It does wind up in the head or the block, so these got to come out. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a new day. So I've got some updates here. I did a little bit of work without filming because it's pretty rainy today, pretty noisy. It's kind of hard to film. But as you can see, we have this big harness leg out of the way, and this is the one that ultimately feeds the transmission. So there were a couple of connectors on the transmission that had to come off, had to be taken loose. You have to take the O2 sensor loose. There is a ground. It is about right. Well, I had it. I just screwed it back in too. Where did that go? Anyway, there's a ground wire. The harness was, there it is. It's way down there. It's right there. I know the light's not great, but there's a 9/16 you got to take loose because there's a ground right there. And you got to take loose the distributor and the coil and all the sensors up here. I've also worked on, oh, I got to put that back in the thing. Took our fuel injection power loose. We're going to take the ground off there at the water neck. And there's one or two items up in the front I need to take loose. There's a wire guide that is inside of a metal tube. I'm not sure how that works, but it's bolted in place, so I've got to take that loose. And once that is done, I should be able to take that giant harness leg right there and flip it out of the way, which that's really important. I may even need to take that clamp loose so I can flip it out of the way higher up, because the idea is that this entire block needs to come up. So we need to take care of that. After that is done and all the wiring is free, the last thing I need to do up here for the engine before I turn my attentions to the drive shaft, because I got to get the transmission off, is this heat shield plate needs to move, and then I need to take loose the passenger side exhaust manifold, and hopefully it goes as well as the driver's side did. After that, we take the drive shaft loose, we take the transmission loose. We have easy access to all the bell housing bolts, fortunately. Get the transmission off. I'm saying this, but this won't be a trivial task because this transmission is big and heavy. Then the very last thing we're going to need to do, and I'm not quite sure how to do it yet, and you can't see them from up here, but the motor mounts have to come out. They have to be separated. I think there's a long big bolt that you can take loose, and I'll probably do that once I have the crane in position and grabbing onto things. I may have to take this, in fact I probably will have to take this off so I can bolt in something for the crane. But I'll have the crane take tension so that way those bolts won't be too hard to take off. Interesting. So I guess the mount points would be there and there. I'm actually going to have to ponder that. I may wind up taking some other bracketry loose here and there to be the mount points for the crane. I'll have to figure that out when I get there. In any case, next stop is going to be going to the front of the engine to spring the rest of this free so I can get it out of the way. Alright guys, updates. See that big mess right there? That's all the electrical for the engine. It's off now. So what I had to do is I had to take the starter off. That's a pair of 9/16 bolts down at the bottom of the engine. Pretty easy to see the vertically mounted bolts. There's only two. And then over there There it goes. There's a ground lug right there you got to take off. There's some zip ties you're going to need to cut. There's a couple of little routing ties you're going to have to pop off that are underneath the block. They're visible if you're looking at the starter and you're chasing down the wires to see what you need to do to get them loose. But essentially, get the starter off, disconnect the wires from the starter, take that ground off, and at that point, you can pull all the legs away. There are other cable legs down there, but those are the ones that run from the engine up into the front, the area you can access from the hood for battery and for all the accessories that are mounted on the other side of the firewall is what all that's for. And we're not worried about that for the purposes of taking this engine out. So we're going to go ahead and I've got a ground strap that is over here. Where is it? It is. There it is. Apologize that this isn't really. There we go. That's better. It's dark and it's rainy, so I'm working by flashlight basically. But there in the corner there's a ground strap from the engine to the frame. That needs to come off. And after that comes off, we really are just down to exhaust. It's going to have to be separated so the from the manifolds. Manifolds need to come off. Bolts need to come off from the side. All the transmission work, drive shaft, all that fun stuff. So progress. I'm not going to show you everything because lighting is not great right now, and I can't get into some of those angles, but a lot of this is fairly intuitive if you're down there and actually looking at it. So, all right, for the next step, to get that shield, the wheel has to come off. And so we got that off. We're using 6-ton jack stands to handle this because this is that's supposed to be a spark plug, I think. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, make sure these are good. Make sure your load is balanced and your stands, both stands are taking weight. It's just safety stuff. So now that we can get in here, we should be able to access whatever bolts are around these parts. I gotta look those up, and then this comes out of the way. And once this is out of the way, we have access to the manifold and we can get that loose. And this also gives us pretty good access to suspension components, which probably will clean, replace some, but not all. We're just trying to get this thing rolling again, not make it perfect. All right, folks, check it out. This is loose. I didn't film any of this because I already showed it on the other side. But now that this is out of the way, our attention turns to, I don't know if I can get it in on this frame. There we go. To the exhaust. That is our next area of attention. There are 3 bolts there, and I want to let you know, just off straight up, expect them to break. Exhaust is almost never a happy ending. I'm very, very pleasantly surprised these all came out. So that's our next stop. Let's go down there, check that out. I'll figure out what the sizes are and we'll see what we can do to get it loose. All right, so I wanted to show you guys this before I started working on it, but they welded the bolt heads to everything else to keep it from backing out, but that also means you can't get tooling on it to get it out. So I gotta grind these tack welds off, which is quite annoying. So fun. Let me get on this with the grinder and see what I can do. Alrighty, folks, we have success. There is our passenger exhaust manifold. We are going to reuse it, so this is good. I don't believe it's cracked up or anything like that. So whoever welded those bolts is truly an evil person. due to the magic of editing, you won't realize that took about an hour and a half of grinding and swearing until I could get those bolts free. Now the good news is on the driver's side, it is the traditional spring tensioned exhaust bolts. So hopefully those come out much faster. I'm going to work over there now, get those out of the way. Just give you an idea of what this looks like now with that out. And the person had put in 9/16 bolts, but on the other side here, I think they're 1/2. I'm going to check. And once that's done, I'm done for today. We're getting probably close to some one-day record rainfall totals here, and I would have to swim to get to the drive shaft. It's about that bad. So after this, I'm done today, but we'll go ahead and get that driver's manifold out. Okay, and there we go. It's off, so it's hard to see from down here, but there are studs that are coming out of the exhaust manifold. And no, recording. There are studs that come out of the exhaust manifold. One of them got stuck. They're 9/16 nuts, though. One of these, like I said, didn't want to go, that guy there, so I just pulled the whole stud out. Have to separate it later. But now we should be able to go up top. Since I've wiggled the collar loose, there should be nothing holding the manifold, and we can go ahead and pull it out. There's our manifold. Free now. Yep, there it goes. See, there's the... Can't really focus. There it is. There's the studs that I was talking about. This is actually an exhaust seal. So the other one should have had this too. This one looks okay. I need both hands to pull this out, but it's free, so it's just a matter of wiggling it out. And with that, I'll catch you guys probably next weekend when the weather's drier, and we will argue with the drive shafts so that we can all